Okay, so welcome back to the channel. Today's quite interesting because I got a notification that someone reacted to my luxury fashion video, which is quite interesting. Um, and then over the past few days, I saw like a few other people reacted to them. Um, but the best reaction video I saw is from a channel called So Anesu. Now, I haven't actually watched this specific video of her reacting to my video because I wanted to react like firsthand. But I did go and see some of her other videos, and she seems very knowledgeable. Her content focuses on like luxury fashion, especially. And from the looks of it, it seems that she focuses on like luxury brands that are of quality, which is a really good thing. So if you're interested in that, definitely subscribe to her channel. Because I know when I made my luxury fashion video, people were asking in the comments to make a video about what brands are actually luxury fashion, and that's something I'll do in the future. But for now, we're going to react to her video, reacting to my video. It's kind of like a funny loophole, but yeah. Let's get straight into it, I guess. Luxury fashion is a waste of money. Now, I am going to tell you exactly why.
Wow, that was an incredibly bold opening statement. I'm not Bernard Arnault's hype girl by any stretch of the imagination, but I recognize when credit is due. Bernard Arnault is a businessman who is incredibly intelligent, he's calculating, he's fearless, he's a trailblazer. And early 2000s, he saw an opportunity to start buying up aspirational brands. And I don't think for a second, when he started building up Louis Vuitton Hermes, he didn't think for a second it would become as successful as it has today.
So okay, so she started the video by talking about Bernard Arnault being a good businessman. I don't think I've ever once said that Bernard Arnault is not good from a business perspective. He's literally one of the richest men in the world. How could you say he's not? That's not the point of the video. The point of the video was to give people an understanding why luxury fashion seems to be reducing in quality and to sort of provide reasons for that. That was the point of the video. It's nothing to do with whether Bernard Arnault is a good or bad businessman. I'm really more focused on the products themselves.
And throughout your video, you consistently mentioned he has single-handedly destroyed luxury fashion. I don't think that's the case. I think the issue with luxury fashion lies firmly with us as the consumers. We need to be a lot more discerning, a lot more demanding when it comes to quality and craftsmanship before parting with our hard-earned cash. Bernard Arnault merely saw an opportunity and he very cleverly made the most of it. A few days ago, a friend of mine sent through your video and asked, what are your thoughts? And I thought, the young man is making some very bold assertions. I'm a little cautious about reacting to videos because some of my viewers have said they would rather I stick to my core offering, which is very much talking about high quality under the radar brands. But I do like reacting from time to time because it presents the opportunity to interact with other audiences I otherwise wouldn't get access to, and just having fun luxury conversations, which is something I really like and enjoy and entertain as I have done now.
I mean, it's a smart idea to do reactions. A lot of times when I do reactions to videos, they react to my reaction and then I get subscribers and then you get views. It's just the YouTube thing. Like now I'm reacting to the video, people are going to see your channel. It's just how these things go. So yeah, definitely a good idea to react
from time to time. But ordinarily, I'm focused on producing educational luxury content for anyone after the finer things, whether you're new to money and wanting to learn how to navigate the terrain, you're into luxury but you want to focus more on high quality under the radar brands, or you're young and starting out in life and wanting to reap the benefits of buying better quality from the get-go, then my content is geared towards you.
Really amazing book by Dana Thomas called How Luxury Lost Its Luster.
The fact that you consistently quoted Dana Thomas's book, How Luxury Lost Its Luster, made me incredibly anxious because the book is 16 years old. The fashion world, luxury as a whole, incredibly dynamic, fast-paced, constantly evolving, tastes change, trends come and go. And so the period you started your video with, the 20th century, the tastes, the styles are redundant now.
Oh, I strongly disagree with that point. Um, First of all, just because the book is 16 years ago doesn't mean that a lot of the information isn't relevant. If we go by that understanding of things, that means no book from the past is worth reading, because everything quote unquote changes. There are business books that were made last century that are still relevant to today, even though the landscape of business is completely different. Um, Also, the book was not the only thing that I quoted. It was just something I told people to go read. But I also told people to go and watch Kingdom of Dreams. Now, Kingdom of Dreams is a very recent documentary series that was actually inspired by the book. So if none of the information from a book that was made in 2007 is relevant, they would not, so many years later, make a documentary series that's based on a book that was made back then. Loads of the information is relevant. In fact, when you read the book, you see that the way that the fashion industry operates, especially from Bernard Arnault's perspective and how he uses his brands, hasn't changed at all. The only thing that has changed are the figures being bigger. And I literally said in the video, I think at one point, that if you multiply all the figures by 10, basically that puts you into the current day. So yeah, saying that the book, just because it's from 2007, means that none of the information is relevant to me is a bit crazy. But yeah.
The market has changed so much. For a start, the market is significantly bigger. 20th century, when you started, it was very much high society. So your royalty, your aristocracy, for example, nobility that you refer to, the rich people. And then over time that evolved onto your entertainers, your musicians, for example. But today, the luxury space is open to absolutely everyone for the taking. The internet has literally opened up luxury to the entire
I'm very sure I made that exact point in the video.
world. And so the numbers are significantly bigger that would like luxury products. So it's just not feasible for brands to take days to turn around a single item, for example. And so brands are now focused on machines. They need to produce significantly larger quantities of clothing items. But the unfortunate thing is a lot of the skill you'd get from the handwork has been lost, but you do get some of the independent brands you mentioned in your video towards the end that have maintained some of those techniques, the skills, the personnel, and do produce smaller quantities of clothes made from a lot of handwork. But that is incredibly expensive, it's labor intensive, and that's out of the reach of the majority of people in this world. So 20th century to now, the landscape has totally changed. The market now needs ready to wear clothes that are ready to buy and wear, and you get on with it. The issue now, of course, is quality. Fast forward to now, a little bit back, 2000. A hugely successful British economist working.
Oh, I need to pause there. So she said that now the market needs ready to wear, and she was saying essentially that the scale is too big now. So because of that, brands have to use machines instead of handcrafting. And that's my first big issue with the luxury fashion industry, and sort of why I made the video in the first place. Now, it's kind of complicated for me to really delve deep into this because most of my videos I editorialize them because videos have to be short, otherwise people won't watch it. On Patreon is why I like talk about things deeply. But there are so many different types of brands that do so many different things. Like right now I'm wearing a Rick Owens jacket. The quality is actually really good, but I did not buy it because it's high quality. I bought it because the design is kind of wacky. It's like a distressed denim jacket that looks kind of interesting, right? Most of these brands, and when I say luxury brands, I'm not talking about every single, I'm talking about, my video was about specifically the big brands. I'm talking about the Balenciagas, the Pradas, the Gucci's, the Louis Vuitton, the Dior's. Those are the brands that people just assume is high luxury because of the name and the way it's marketed, and they just buy stuff without actually knowing what they're really buying into or if it's quality or not. So part of educating people about this is to tell people about the practices of these things, to tell people that I know you might associate this with a brand that was handmade so many years ago, but that's not really how it's made anymore. So you're paying this high price, just know what you're buying. If you're actively buying that knowing fully well, then that's completely different. But the point of my video is to introduce people to an understanding that you're not getting your money's worth when you're buying a lot of these brands in the way that you would last century, because things were handmade, because things were made in an atelier. There's so many things I can go into. Like, even there's a documentary that shows that even the so-called made in Italy that is seen as like, oh my God, it's made in Italy. There's actually a lot of evidence of brands who use illegal immigrants in their factories and then don't pay them money and then treat them badly because they have no like legal rights in the country they're in, and exploit them. So people think that they're getting an ethical product and a well-made product because it's made in Italy, but actually it's made in parts of Italy where people are literally still doing illegal activities in Italy. So there's so many aspects to it. This is why it's important to read the book, because in the book, there's so many deep, dark things that she mentions, down to like people's legs being broken when they didn't like sew things but within a certain speed, sorry. So that's why the book is so relevant.
Working for Goldman Sachs called Jim O'Neill. He coined the acronym BRIC, and BRIC stands for Brazil, Russia, India, China, and in 2010 he added the S to BRIC for South Africa. Those 5 countries, at that time, there are more countries that have been added to the BRIC group this year, were some of the fastest growing emerging market economies in the world. And they were producing a rising middle class with money to spend. They were aspirational, they were striving for more. And throw into the equation the internet. The internet then opened up the world to everyone. So you're getting a rising middle class with money. They're seeing high quality.
I'm very sure in my video I mentioned the rising middle class as a reason why the luxury fashion market has expanded.
Western luxury products, which they want. Step into the foray, Bernard Arnault starts to seize the opportunity. He's seeing people with money. He starts buying aspirational brands and creating hugely aspirational, iconic products. And he marries those with the aspirational audience. And that was...
See, this is what I don't like about Bernard Arnault's marketing in the first place, which is what I was critiquing. This aspiration. It should just be about quality. This whole aspirational thing, it's how they deceive people into buying things that they shouldn't be buying, or things that are just way overpriced, because they just convince you that it's an aspirational product. So if you want to associate yourself with a higher level of society, you have to buy these products to be part of this like club. And that's part of the reason why I made the video. That's my big issue with the way that Bernard Arnault, and not just him, like I said in my initial video, but just the way that luxury fashion is marketed in general.
Was the beginnings of what is now the behemoth Louis Vuitton Moet Hennessy, which then triggered all the other brands that are also growing, Kering, Richemont, for example, that also quoted. And then back to the bit about Dana Thomas and how you referred to her work and how it's literally pivotal and what the fashion space is focused on. She has laid the foundation on what is the fashion space today.
Bear in mind that this book came out in 2007, so a lot of the figures that she quotes in the book are probably, you can multiply all those figures by 10, if not more.
It's not just the numbers that need to be multiplied by 10, but all the various excerpts you included within your video were vastly out of date. None of that information is applicable to date. And what also made me even more anxious was the fact that you're going to be reviewing this book afterwards because you think it's a great foundation to the fashion industry as we speak today. I haven't read the book. I was tempted to buy the book, but...
Okay, so if you haven't read the book, it's very hard to critique something if you haven't read the book. Because you don't even know what's in it, you don't know the information, you don't know what's relevant, you don't know what isn't. Now, to be completely transparent, the only part of the book I used for the video to show how detailed this book is like the 8-page intro. On Patreon, I'm reviewing the book part by part, and I'm talking about the documentary episode by episode. So on my Patreon, I'm going really, 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 really deep into it in a way that I can't on my channel, right? But if you haven't read the book, how do you know that all this stuff is out of date? How could you possibly know that? And how could you say it's not relevant to today when you haven't read the book at all? I just don't understand critiquing me referencing a book that you haven't read. I don't understand how that makes any sense. I genuinely don't.
The fact that it's 2007, it's 16 years out of date. I would be confident enough to say I don't think there's a single thing that's still relevant in that book.
She literally said she doesn't think there's a single thing that's still relevant in the book. A single thing. That's insane. Let's just keep going.
The industry is too fast paced. There's a book I referenced 3 years ago. An HSBC equity research analyst, Owen Randburg. I forget the name of the book, but I'm going to include a snippet just next to me. And this is a book I last read when I bought it in 2020. I haven't looked at that book since because it's 3 years out and a lot has changed. There's some great bits that are foundation because it's not too far out. But after 5 years, I don't even regard anything. I wish I could recommend a book.
After 5 years, she doesn't regard anything. I think that's a horrible way to think about fashion. Personally, as a fashion journalist, everything that happens now, there's a reason in the past for why it happens. You have to understand the past to know why we are in the current day. You have to know what happened last century to know why things are the way they are this century. That's why people use case studies from way, way back in the past to influence how they do business, or in science, they use case studies to see how they do health and safety. When I studied chemical engineering, we would do so many case studies to know, okay, this happened in this period. Why did this happen? What can we do now to make sure that we don't repeat that? So you always need the past. You always need information from the past to inform how you think in the present day, and also for you to understand what's going on in the current day. So to say anything past 5 years, you don't regard it at all, to me is insane. That is really insane. Coupled with the fact she said she can confidently say that every single thing in the book, not a single thing is relevant, yet she hasn't read it, is mind-blowing.
For you to read. That's more recent, a lot more relevant. But I can't think of anything. If I do, I'll include it in the description box down below after recording. But I do tend to read a lot of management consultancy reports, accountancy reports, stuff around Gen Zs, your millennials, your Gen Alpha, the luxury space. They're relevant, they are current, and you have analysts who are pulsing with the industry, telling you exactly what's happening at the minute. And I'd be more inclined to recommend those than a book that's 16 years out and has very little bearing to what's really happening now.
Luxury goods industry, as it is known today, is a $157 billion business.
The luxury goods market as of 2022 was valued at $1.45 trillion. For the sake of transparency,
I literally said earlier in the original video that you can multiply it by 10 because the figures are bigger. Why are the figures bigger? Because the market is wider. These things are just things that everyone knows. It's very obvious. My audience knows that. I don't need to tell them. My audience is very educated on fashion. So yeah, I just don't really see the point in bringing up something I've already said. And I think this is what she means when she's saying like the information isn't relevant because she's focusing on specific figures. But the figures are not the point of the video. The video is not talking about the sales figures of fashion. I have live streams where we talk about that in depth. In fact, I just posted a recent video about Gucci and where they're going financially. That's a video where I'm talking about the current present day financials and what the Q1 and the Q2 figures look like. The point of this video is to talk about how luxury fashion has changed, explaining how it's changed, and giving reasons why the quality has become very bad and also why it's not worth your money. Because imagine, fashion now, you hear about brands like Hermes and Chanel raise their prices every year, but they're made worse and worse. Like, there's so many issues with how expensive luxury fashion is, despite it being made worse. And that's the point of the video, to say that a lot of this stuff isn't worth the money. And so to focus on, me saying, the book being 16 years old, and in the book it's saying that, the luxury fashion industry is worth in the hundreds of billions, but actually now it's worth in the trillions, when I said earlier that you can multiply the figures by 10. I don't see how that adds anything in helping the audience, the wider audience, understand the realm or why luxury fashion has gotten to where it has today.
All of my reaction videos, I will always source my data either from Tier 1 European or American investment banks, the top management or accounting firms. In this case, I have sourced all of my data from 2 Bain & Co. Research reports, which I will include the links in the description box down below.
They cluster their stores on main city avenues, in airports, in outlet malls. Their advertisements fill magazines and blanket billboards.
There's the fashion landscape pre-COVID and then the landscape post-COVID. 2 very different landscapes. Before, it was all about, as you mentioned, print media, and it was also going into the brand's store, physically going into a store. Whereas COVID meant that people weren't able to go into stores. And so having digital online presence really became significant. And a number of brands really struggled because they weren't particularly prominent online. Think, for example, Chanel. You still have brands like Goya who don't have any digital presence online where you can physically buy their products from their store. You always have to go in.
Okay, so this is, once again, this is hyperbole. So she's trying to prove that the book is out of date by talking about how the book talks about advertisements in terms of like print media and stuff like that, whereas now things are digital and they're luxury fashion brands that wouldn't be found dead selling online, but COVID pushed a lot of brands in that direction. And so the way that fashion is marketed now is different, because now fashion is marketed digitally, not via print media, I think is where she's going with that point. To me, it's still hyperbole, because the point she's making is not whether it's digital or print. She's talking about the fact that these are brands that just didn't even market themselves at all. These are brands that focused on their quality, doing the talking, and word of mouth, and the fact that that almost added to the prestige and how far away it was from normal people, that no one would even see this stuff. It wouldn't be marketed. Whereas when Bernard Arnault came in, the strategy became to push it in as many faces as possible. So that concept does not change, whether it's digitally or via print. And even if you read the book, which she hasn't read, when you see the specific things that Dana Thomas talks about, like Dana Thomas in part of the book talks about the reason why Bernard Arnault started to advertise brands at sports events, the reason why Rolex is sponsoring stuff like Wimbledon, why is this brand sponsoring this? And it's very relevant to today, because LVMH is going to be one of the biggest official partners of the 2024 Olympics in Paris. So the reasoning for why Dana Thomas was talking about why luxury fashion wants to be associated with sport and why this makes sense, and she talks about it in the book, is the same reason why Bernard Arnault has decided that it's a very good idea for LVMH to be one of the official partners for the 2024 Olympics. So you're getting lost in hyperbole and you're using that, but you're actually missing the actual real reason or the point of the book and the point of my video.
So when you have pandemics, for example, they really struggle. But what's really significant now and how people are typically buying luxury is one of 3 ways. Either through social media, on the internet, doing a search, or going onto the brand's online store. That is the majority of luxury consumers now. The consumers now are considerably younger. Gen Y, your millennials, and your Gen Z, that I'll talk about in a second.
Their primary customers are upper income women between 30 and 50 years old.
72% of the luxury goods market in 2022 was made up of millennials and Gen Zs.
In Asia, so once again, she's talking about, the market is different because now it's a different number of like it's more Gen Z and it's more millennials. It's no longer like older people that are the market. Now, once again, hyperbole, reason being, the reason why it looks as if the younger part of the market dominates kind of like the customer base of luxury fashion is because, like I said in the video, luxury brands have constantly been promoting and creating products that sit at the bottom of the totem pole of the luxury goods for each brand. So they need things that are cheaper and cheaper. That's why Gucci makes socks. Gucci make all these belts, and they make all these cheap things like booklets and bookcases and all these things that people can buy into. And the stuff at the cheaper side of the price point will be what sells way more than the runway jacket that costs 5,000. So the people that are buying the £5,000, £10,000, $15,000 jacket from Gucci that was on the runway remain unchanged. These are still the older people that have that kind of money. People that are young don't have the money that people have when they're old. That's just logic, because when you're older, you go further in your career, your businesses, you've had longer to run your business, whatever you're doing. The people that are older, the older you get on average, the more money you make. And so therefore, the only reason why the customer base has shifted to a younger demographic is because there are cheaper things that sit at the bottom, like more perfumes, more belts, more cheaper footwear, things like t-shirts that did not exist, and all these things that sit at the bottom, which makes it look like the customer base is younger. But that's a customer base for a different kind of product. The kind of products that I was talking about in the video that have lost quality, the things that like actual clothes, like the jackets, the footwear, the leather jackets, you know, all that sort of stuff, the suits, that sort of stuff, the customer base is still people that are older that can actually afford that stuff. The customer base veers younger, starting at 25.
The customer base is now even younger. As I mentioned before, 72% of the market is your millennials and your Gen Z. Millennials are starting to buy luxury earlier, 18 to 20. Your Gen Zs, they're buying luxury from about 15. And Bain & Co predict that by 2030, millennials, Gen Z, and Generation Alpha will account for 80% of the luxury goods market. And I'm sure Gen Alphas will be buying luxury from 13.
They dressed celebrities who in return told every reporter lining the red carpet which company had provided their gown, jewels, handbag, tuxedo, or shoes. They began to sponsor high-profile sporting and entertainment events. Bernard Arnault has this way of using LVMH, and the way they market is they talk about... By the way, that still happens now, because she said nothing in the book is relevant, about brands lamenting about what brand is dressing them and stuff. That happens on the red carpet all the time now. It literally has not changed one bit, but let's continue. History a lot. Use that history to sell a t-shirt and to sell perfumes and to sell cosmetics. Luxury is what it means to you. Luxury is not just about quality, but now luxury is about a feeling. It's about how it makes you feel. I'm like, if you're going to charge me $2,000 to $10,000 for a product, it has to be high quality. I don't care how it makes me feel.
There's a fairly chunky middle bit where you talk about Bernard Arnault always referencing the heritage, the bit about the slick marketing, celebrities, Louis Vuitton sponsored events, for example, and then your feelings and how you didn't like the fact that there's all this talk about feelings when it comes to luxury. You just want to focus on quality. I'm just going to group that all into one. Luxury, whether you like it or not, is about an identity. People buy luxury goods because they want to identify with whatever that luxury good stands for. And so when Bernard Arnault references the...
Okay, but what these luxury brands stand for, apart from obviously being branded as being aspirational and high society, and having those associations, also stands for quality and craftsmanship, and that's also what these brands market. So if that's what you market, but that's not the reality because what you're making is low quality, then in a way, it's kind of false marketing.
History, for example, what he is saying is we've been known for producing these brands, the 20th century, great designers. They were known for the phenomenal quality of the materials they used, the exceptional craftsmanship. So the brand is dipping back into that. It's giving the
But the brand isn't dipping back into that. Like most of these brands don't have specialized ateliers where every single piece is made. Most brands now, their ateliers are mainly used for their YouTube videos when they want to show how they make a product, but that's not actually where it's produced. It's produced in some factory very far away from that place in bulk. Or these ateliers are used to make the couture collections, the haute couture collections, and mainly that. But when it comes to ready to wear, obviously they have to outsource to all these massive factories elsewhere. So I don't really understand how you can say these brands are dipping back into that. They're really not. They're dipping back into the marketing of it and marketing that they're associated with those brands. But the way the brands operate now and the quality of what they make now is completely different from back then.
Consumer confidence in the provenance of the product, where it's coming from, the history, the quality, the craftsmanship, the skill to make the products. And then nowadays they have this modern spin where they have built hugely iconic aspirational products for each brand, the aspirational consumers I mentioned before. And this is where the magic sauce lies, not just for LVMH with Bernard Arnault, but the other big groups as well, Richemont, Kering, for example, and a number of others, as you have rightly mentioned. What they will typically do is each brand build iconic products. Think, for example, Givenchy with the Antigona, Louis Vuitton with the I think it's called the Alma. There's the Speedy. There's the Neverfull, for example.
Fendi, baguette bag,
and then you have Fendi with the Peekaboo, for example. They will
Peekaboo,
build those iconic products, put some really slick marketing on them, make them hugely iconic, aspirational, air of exclusivity with the phenomenal high price tag. And then people are drawn to them because they want to associate with whatever each of those brands stands for in those eyes. That is a formula that's been used literally on wash and repeat by all the brands, and they'll keep doing it because it works. It's lower hanging fruit. People want to buy the products that people see, they like, they're revered, they're associated with the celebrities, with different events, they mean a certain...
Just to pause here. So once again, my audience, because I think this is the first time she's watched the video of mine. There's certain things that I don't need to explain to my audience, this being one of them. The way it's marketed, everyone understands that. That's not the point of the video. The point of the video that I made is to look past the marketing and actually realize what's the quality of the product you're getting. Like, okay, going back to How Luxury Lost Its Luster, this is why I say that you cannot critique it without reading the book. Now, Dana Thomas interviewed Tom Ford in this book, and Tom Ford talks about when he was working at Gucci and how he had to find this perfect balance between what the consumers want and what the shareholders want. And he had to constantly run this balance. So sometimes he would do things that in the long term, he obviously knew they were a bad decision for the brand's long-term health. But in the short term, they would keep shareholders happy and he would be able to keep his job and he'll be able to move on. So a lot of things, because of the way it is and because shareholders run these brands now, designers can't even do what they want to do. They can't even really focus on quality. And like I said in the video, they're constantly cutting corners. So the baguette bag that you got 10 years ago is different to the baguette bag you got now. A lot of the Chanel flat bags that you got 20 years ago are different, very different in quality to the ones you get now. And guess what? The Chanel flat bags that you get now are worth way more. They cost way more to buy. Way, way more. The price is way, way higher, which to me is insane. And that's the point of making the video. How can you charge more for a bag that's made less, like it's less well made? How can you charge more for that? And that's the exact reason why I wanted to make the video, just to spread some awareness on it. I don't necessarily hate luxury brands. I don't think I've ever bought any product from like a major luxury brand. Apart from maybe Prada. I bought a Prada bucket hat once, and the reason was because the shape of the Prada bucket hats were very different to all the other brands. So I really like it. That's why I bought it. I love Dior perfumes. Like, I'm a fat Dior Privé perfumes. They're the best. I think the cost to price proposition of the Dior Privé perfumes is amazing because they can provide high quality materials in terms of like natural raw materials in their perfumes, but at the same time keep the price lower than a niche brand would to use the same materials because it's economies of scale. A brand like Dior is big enough to where they can buy these raw materials in such huge amounts because they're selling so many fragrances that they can end up, that can go to the consumer and the consumer pays less. So I'm a big fan of a lot of products from different luxury brands. Not like I hate them, but for me to buy something, it has to be good quality. And the second that Dior Privé start watering down their fragrances and I spray something on my skin and it lasts 2 hours, I'm going to go from a fan to not buying it at all. And that's my thing. Like, if I'm going to spend my money on something, let it be well made, especially if it's expensive. And that's the thing. I don't have an issue buying expensive things. For me, it's how it's marketed. When I buy an Under Millimista piece, they had some quality control issues and now the quality is really good. But that was not really the reason why I was buying the clothing in the first place. And that's not how Under Millimista is marketed. Under Millimista is a gothic, grungy, poetic brand that is telling you a story. It's storytelling. And it's the silhouettes and shapes that you like. Like the backlacing Vitello boots, you only get that at Under Millimista. You don't get that anywhere else. Whereas these brands sell t-shirts that are overpriced with just a print that you can make at any print shop. So that's my thing. It's just the way it's marketed that I have an issue with. In terms of price point, there's many things that I buy that are the same price point as things that luxury brands sell. I just won't buy the Dior one. I just won't buy the Gucci one because in comparison to the brand I would buy, it's just less well made. So that's the point of the video. And in the video, I even said that it's not everything that these brands make that is low quality. You have to actually learn and be able to discern the difference between what's well made and what isn't, what's a good quality product, what isn't. And on my channel, once again, if you go back a few videos, I have interviews with different craftsmen and designers, and we are having long form discussions about what constitutes high quality clothing. So if you go back and watch some of my videos, just literally a few videos back, that was the kind of video I was making.
Thing in certain societies. For some people, it means you're happy. It means you've arrived. You now can afford certain things. And so it's all of the slick marketing together with the heritage that has made Bernard Arnault phenomenally successful. Look at yourself. Particular instance, you've referred to the horse-bit loafers and how you like the history associated with the horse-bit loafers from Gucci. But what has stopped you buying them is the quality. But with most consumers, they will buy into the history of the horse-bit loafer.
So I think she doesn't realize that we agree. I think because I, in the video, said that I love Gucci horsebit loafers because I actually do. I think they're amazing, like design-wise. And I like what the history means. I've talked about this in the video, so I won't go into like why I like it. But the reason why I won't buy it is because the quality is horrific. Especially when you compare it to other brands that sell shoes and footwear and they're like, they specialize in footwear and their stuff costs less. It's like, how could I possibly justify spending this money on Gucci? Even if I was a billionaire, I still wouldn't buy it. It just doesn't make sense. It's not logical. But that's the thing. She's saying that most consumers would buy it because of the story, not caring about the quality. And that's why I made the video. To let people know, just so you know, just in case you didn't know, these things aren't high quality like you think they are, like you're assuming, just because it's a luxury brand and it has these associations from the past that was good quality and they've managed to market the current stuff as if it's made like it was when it isn't. So that's the point of the video. She's actually agreeing with me without actually knowing.
And then buy the shoes because they want that complete association. But what we need more of is for people to move away from the hugely aspirational brands. You did also touch on...
So she's actually agreeing with me once again. So this is something I preach about on my channel, like moving away from these big luxury brands. Like, I don't understand why people have to get the Dior jacket or have to get the Gucci jacket when, like, there are so many brands in fashion, so many that make stuff just as good, if not better. that cost way less. I just will never understand it. I don't get it. I will never understand it. It's not something I will understand. Like, I can understand why people do it, but the logic of it to me just doesn't make sense. It will never make sense.
Countries producing in third world countries. That is still an issue where countries are producing in your less developed economies, cheap labor, you don't have to look at the practices, you can get away with really bad behavior and producing phenomenal quantities of clothing items. But what's important now, and this is something we're going to start to see more and more of, is the majority of the consumers, the millennials, the Gen Zs I've been referring to, are focused on the whole ethical, the sustainable focus when it comes to brands and so forth. They like authenticity, they like transparency, they like functionality, they like honesty when it comes to a brand.
So this is a very interesting point about consumers because when I worked at the business of fashion, we used to look at these business reports of the fact that Gen Z and millennial consumers care more about the ethics of brands and they care more about how sustainable is this brand? What are their ethics? And it's very weird because you read these reports and then you see that Shein is literally one of the fastest growing fast fashion brands. And you're like, where do the two correlate? So it's kind of very difficult to say that consumers care about ethics when Balenciaga literally moved production of their footwear from like the Triple S specifically from Italy to China, or when these luxury brands are using factories where they're using illegal immigrants and not paying them money in Italy. Like, and people are still buying this stuff. So there's reports and there's looking at, you know, things that are analyzed. And then there's also actually just looking at reality and what's going on in reality and looking at the brands that are making the most money and looking at the brands that are growing the quickest. And this stuff is so obvious because it's the way brands market sustainability. I find it so hilarious. It's so funny because if we're going to have that conversation, no fashion brand is sustainable. Sustainability to me does not exist in fashion because if you have a fashion brand, it's inherently unsustainable. Now, why is that? Because there are already too many clothes in circulation already. That's why in Western countries, they get all these clothes that everyone supposedly gives to charity and they dump them in places like my home country, Nigeria, places like Ghana, countries like India. And these clothes can literally be used. All they need to do is maybe there's a hole in, there's a rip in one seam and you just need to get needle and thread and literally fix it and it's good as new. But people just don't want to do that. So they just give it to charity, not caring where these things go and then they get dumped in third world countries, right? Now, what I don't understand is brands saying we're a sustainable brand. We make sustainably made clothing. No, you don't, because clothing isn't sustainable. So I don't like when people pretend, and this goes back to the false marketing that I say luxury brands do. I don't like lies. A lot of them just like lie, or I think a lot of people in fashion like to deceive themselves or feel better about themselves. Like, oh, this is like organic cotton. It's not like some sort of synthetic cotton, so it's like better for the environment. No. What will be better for the environment is just brands producing less and a lot of brands not existing. That would be better for the environment. So unless we're going to have that conversation, the whole sustainability as a marketing tactic and as a marketing tool, to me, just never made any sense, and it doesn't make any sense. And if you talk to any sustainability expert, which I have over the years, interviewing a lot of them for articles, they will say the exact same thing. So once again, the sustainability marketing and brands caring and consumers caring about ethics, it doesn't really hold weight a lot of the time.
And as more brands become aware of the fact that it's a younger consumer with certain demands, and for them to stand out, they need to be mindful. So where you talk about third world countries, it is still happening. I will not lie, I won't deny it. But what you'll find is there are a number of companies that are coming up and doing incredibly well off the back of being a lot more ethical in their practices, sustainable in their production methods, the materials they're using, for example. And more of those companies are starting to rise, and your younger consumers are pushing those brands to the forefront through the power of social media.
Now, I agree with her because there are brands like Veya or Patagonia that have literally been really popular and they've risen to really high heights over the years because of like ethics. Once again, I feel like if your brand exists, it's not ethical, but at least they try to be more ethical compared to other brands, right? And that's what consumers buy into because they're like, yeah, this is so sustainable, whatever. Um, that being said, the point of my video is exactly agreeing with the point she made, which is a very good point that she just made, is that people should stop focusing on these like heritage luxury brands and focus on the newer brands that do things better. I just don't understand why, like, and this shows you actually the power of marketing that people just cannot let go of these big superpower names that have nothing to do with what they used to produce 50, 100 years ago. I just don't know why people just won't let go, because if people let go, they would buy clothes that are high quality, they would be buying into brands that do things slightly more ethically. I won't say a lot, but slightly more ethically. And that's what I don't understand. That's why I'm looking forward to when blockchain gets a rollout in fashion, because I feel like when blockchain is integrated into fashion, what will happen is you'll be able to trace the origin of how something is made. And then truly, I'm not sure how many brands are going to get away with some of the stuff they get away with. But till then, we are where we are. And it's not like, because she's saying that, oh yes, these things happen in terms of things being produced in third world countries. But no, I'm telling you that, because she makes it seem like things are improving. I'm telling you that Balenciaga moved production from Italy to China. I'm telling you that luxury brands have started to move their production from Western countries where there are more laws in place and labor laws and things in place to make sure that workers don't get exploited, workers aren't treated a certain way. I mean, just look at things that happen in the factories in Bangladesh and the death that happened and all that sort of stuff. Have those brands changed the way they use factories? No. Just recently, we have stories of even factories in the UK and the working conditions that they're in that are still illegal. So there are brands, even in places where it's legal, they're still doing their illegal practice. Like, so these things improving, I personally just don't see it, especially from the top luxury brands. But I think if we all just go away from these massive luxury brands, let go, I think things will be a lot better.
Just to get a few on your radar as a way of navigating, think of brands, for example, such as a recent one I've come across, Maison Saint Julien, Mother of Pearl, Eileen Fisher. One of my favorites for bodysuits and t-shirts, 90%. Also throw into that equation, Veja, Gabriella Hearst, and also Byte Studios.
If you enjoy high quality fashion, the last place you should look is these big heritage houses.
I do agree with you to an extent that if you're after quality, go for the smaller independent brands as opposed to the big groups with the heritage houses. But there still are a few under the radar golden nuggets within the big groups you've mentioned that don't always get the publicity they deserve. Think, for example, within LVMH, you have Celine, you have Loewe, you have Loro Piana. Kering, you have Brioni, and then Richemont, you have Alaya.
So she's talking about Alaya and all these brands. Those, when people consider the top luxury brands, no one is talking about Loewe. Like, I'm sorry. People talk about Dior, Gucci, Louis Vuitton, Chanel, Hermes, mainly. Those are like the main Givenchy. Those are the brands that people talk about. So when I say these massive luxury brands, they're not worth it, I'm talking about the top luxury brands. I'm not talking about Alaya and like she said Brioni, or she's going to mention maybe a brand like Beluti, or like people are not thinking about these brands. Like these are not the brands I'm talking about. I'm talking about your Pradas. I'm talking about your Gucci's, your Chanel's, your Hermes's, and that's why I emphasized the top, the big, the largest luxury brands. Of course, the ones that are a bit lower, they will still care about quality. Like even Phoebe Philo Celine is like known to have like really good quality stuff. And that's why a lot of the Phoebe Philo Celine clothes still hold up till today and people are still buying and selling those things because the quality has meant that these garments hold up. But I'm sorry, but Celine still is not like one of those massive brands. How do I know this? I interview so many people every day And there's very few people that are not really into fashion that actually know who Phoebe Philo is. Whereas to me, as someone that's really into fashion, I'm like, what? Phoebe Philo is huge. Like, she's so influential. She's massive. So as a journalist, I've had to take myself out of this fashion person sort of realm and be able to understand, okay, this is what the fashion person thinks. And to the fashion person, Phoebe Philo is like a very famous designer. But to the everyday person, they don't even know who Phoebe Philo is, type of thing.
Yeah, and you also have Dunhill.
I think for majority of you, if you like high quality clothing, I think you should look elsewhere. I think you should support independent designers that actually, care about the clothing.
Some smaller brands I think really worth getting on your radar. One that can never do any wrong.
Oh, she's going to mention some like smaller brands. So I'm definitely going to look out for what she mentions. Let's see what she says.
One of my personal favorites, Jil Sander. For Macintosh, directional fashion, think for example, the usual suspects is Miyake, Yohji Yamamoto.
Okay, I thought she was going to mention like low-key brands. Okay, Jil Sander, yeah. I've made loads of videos on Jil Sander, Yohji, all this stuff. Yohji, quality, it depends. With Yohji, some stuff is high quality and some stuff isn't. But the thing about Yohji is it's the highest quality that it could be. It's just because Yohji Yamamoto is, let me not say an avant-garde brand, but it's very different from the average thing that you see. That's why a selling point of Yohji is actually the way it looks and the silhouette of the garments, more so than the quality. But it still is good quality. Like, you look at the trousers, it's like 100% natural wool, like the fabrics used. But even that has started to go slightly downhill a bit. How do I know this? I have really good friends that own stores that stock Yohji. I'm literally in group chats with Yohji stans. I'm very involved with Yohji. I literally interviewed Yohji Yamamoto for Vogue Runway. I went to Yohji Yamamoto's showroom. Like, these are brands that I'm very involved with. But yeah, I thought she was going to mention like some really low-key brands.
But one high quality, very much under the radar, Casely Hayford London. For suits, one I've mentioned, Brio.
Okay, Casey Hayford is kind of like, that's a really good recommendation. Casey Hayford is like kind of big in London, but I can understand why it'll be seen as low-key. I'm sure a lot of people don't really know about Casey Hayford, but yeah.
You've got Kiton, you've got Cesar Atolini. For shirts, Chave. You mentioned Japanese salvage denim. Think, for example, Ironheart, a British brand. You have Osaka 5. You also have Japan Blue. And a brand I recently discovered in the last couple of years and really liking, Le Mer.
Most of the brands that are high quality now is because they've gone through generations without being owned by a conglomerate. And once they're owned by a conglomerate, the quality goes down. This is not just a fashion thing, by the way.
I don't think that's altogether true. There are still some amazing brands, very much under the radar, owned by the big conglomerates. Two immediately come to mind. They're not within the fashion space, but broadly luxury. The first is Moynard. It's not owned by Louis Vuitton Hermes, but it's owned by Bernard Arnault. I don't know what the ownership structure is. It doesn't matter, but he has pumped money into that brand. First opened in 1849, and then it closed down and then was reopened in 2010. He has built it into a brand, which is why he bought it, to rival Hermes, and he's done a phenomenal job. The craftsmanship, the quality of the work, their bags are better than Hermes. Another one recently bought.
Once again, I don't know how many times we're going to have to make this point, but the point of the video was to tell people that the biggest luxury brands, for example, like you said, Hermes, and Hermes is even a brand that's considered higher. Well, they've stayed true to their roots of having a higher craftsmanship than a lot of other brands, let's say in the LVMH stable, for example. But yeah, the whole point is to tell people to sort of let go of these big brands, or if you're going to buy these biggest of names, then just know that you're not really getting your money's worth. Now, me saying, as a rule of thumb, when conglomerates own a brand that have been owned by a family, it tends to be the case that the quality goes down. That is like me editorializing, but if you want me to get deeper into it, if you think of any single brand that was directly bought from a family or whatever, so if you're like Gucci that was acquired from the family, the quality went down. Creed fragrances acquired from the family, the quality went down. Guerlain is like probably one of the most iconic fragrance brands. And actually, Guerlain is actually a brand that still tries really hard to stay true to its roots, like Hermes, but still, the quality of Guerlain fragrances has gone down. So when it's bought directly from a family, the only reason to do that is you're seeing this thing, it's profitable, and a businessman comes in and is like, how can I make more money from this specific thing? Whereas when a brand has been dead for however long, and then someone tries to bring it back, that is actually a passion project. That is actually someone caring about the brand because there's no proof that it would sell now because it's literally a dead brand. Kind of similar to what happened with Schiaparelli. So that's a completely different dynamic to a family is making something and producing something that is clearly making a lot of money, and a businessman comes in to try and generate even more and to make a profit out of it. Those two circumstances to me are completely different.
By Richemont in the last couple of years, Delvo. Again, a phenomenal brand, founded in 1829, and it's been going ever since. It's a Belgian brand, typically carried, or it has been known to have the Royal Association. I recently created a video where I was saying I hope
skip because I think she's going to make the same point.
Profile of Delvo, because
okay, so her point is like we should make raise the profile of like brands like Delvo and like brands that are high quality but people don't see. Good point, but I already do that. So, I mean, you're preaching to the choir here. Like, people on my channel. In fact, I live stream for the most part when Fashion Week happens. I live stream and talk about almost every single brand that shows at Fashion Week. So I review the shows of Prada and the Gucci's, but I also review the more low-key brands like Charles Jeffrey Loverboy and the smaller brands in London or the smaller brands that are showing for the first time in Milan, or brands that are on the rise like Tokyo James. So you're preaching to the choir. I'm not the type of person that only talks about brands, you know, like Hermes and stuff. I literally have a series on my channel called Who Is, where I focus on different designers. I've talked about Barbara Sanchez Kane, the Mexican designer. I've talked about Paria Farzaneh, a designer from Iran. I've talked about Priya Alawalia, a Nigerian and Indian designer based in London. Talked about so many designers. So once again, I think this is a bit of preaching to the choir.
I do sense the big brands are seeing that although quiet luxury was something that people were talking about as a trend, it's not. It's a mindset, and it was only heightened off the back of Gwyneth Paltrow's Succession, for example.
I'm really into fragrances and perfumes. The same thing happens in perfumes. You hear so many times of companies like Estee Lauder acquiring the rights to a fragrance company, and all of a sudden they reformulate all the fragrances.
For what it's worth, I think it's really important to buy whatever luxury items you are after from a brand focused on producing just those items. So if you're, for example...
I 100% agree. That's such a good point. And I think I talked about this earlier in terms of footwear, where if you buy stuff from a brand that specifically focuses on that product, like a perfume, you buy fragrances from a perfumer who has a perfume line, or you buy footwear from a brand that focuses on footwear, or you buy suits from a tailor. That, to me, is where you're probably going to get the best quality and the best craftsmanship. And I say this on my channel all the time. And that's why I don't buy these luxury brands, apart from very specific cases where it makes sense. Because once again, like I said, the Dior private fragrance line, the Dior Privé line, which I love their fragrances at that quality are always going to cost less than a perfumer who went to perfume school and like has all that expertise and started their own line, because their brand is so small that they can't buy the raw materials in bulk the way a Dior can. And so their fragrances have to be expensive. And from time to time, because I do like fragrances and I do appreciate the work of perfumers, I will buy the fragrances from fragrance lines of perfumers I like, especially perfumers that make perfumes of like the Dior Privé line. Like Francois Kurkdjian, for example, made one of the latest Dior Privé fragrances. That's why, to support, Francois's work, I'll buy something from his actual fragrance line. and his fragrance brand. But that's a very good point. You're always going to get the best quality when you focus on brands that focus on specifically what you're buying. Amazing point. I definitely can't refute that.
After household items, knives, pots, fragrances like you mentioned in the video, go with a brand that produces that. Whether it's Wusthof, Zwilling for everyday knives, for your pots, De Meyer or Staub.
Zwilling's really good for knives, I must say. Zwilling is so good. Like their knives, sorry, are so good. I just have to mention that, but yeah.
Or fragrances, Creed, Henri Jacques.
Creed, once again, I mentioned Creed. Creed is like Guerlain. Creed is like, it's a family fragrance house. It was the family that had this heritage and they focused on these fragrances. Same thing as Guerlain, but both of them got acquired. And both of them, the quality of the fragrances drastically got reduced. Actually, Creed Aventus was the fragrance that really got me into fragrances because I learned about Creed Aventus and I learned how Creed Aventus changed the landscape of men's fragrances, and a lot of men's fragrances went in that citrus direction because of Creed Aventus. And that kind of became like a masculine smell, like very citrusy stuff. But Creed Aventus itself has been reformulated so many times now that it's so unrecognizable from the original that people buy things that smell like the old Creed Aventus. So you'll hear of dupes like, well, dupes that are worse off, like Afnan Not Only Intense, Extrite, or you hear people talking about Club de Nuit Intense, Man, or at the higher tier, at the more expensive end, you hear people talking about Nishane Hasivat, which to me is the best replacement for Creed Aventus in terms of like quality of ingredients and stuff. So once again, Creed used to be a house that was well renowned for like fragrances, and it's a brand that focuses only on fragrances and nothing else. But still, once they get acquired, things get watered down. So even then, you still have to be careful what you're buying.
Kilian, Frederic Malle, for example.
Frederic Malle is going the same direction as Guerlain Creed, like I just mentioned.
Smaller brands will be focused on producing the very best they can afford. They only have that particular product to make a success of things. And what you'll also find is that service and aftercare tend to be very good as well. That is how they set themselves apart from the big players in order to be able to gain business and maintain and keep getting repeat business from the consumer. What I also say is always try to buy the very best you can afford. I'm huge on buying high quality. You buy the very best you can afford and you reap maximum benefits. Whatever it is you buy performs very well and it lasts a lifetime, if not a very long time. I've thoroughly enjoyed creating this reaction video. I think what really got to me was I think you gave Bernard Arnault a really tough time. He's a man who merely has seen a phenomenon.
I did not give Bernard Arnault a tough time. Bernard Arnault will be fine. He's one of the richest men in the world. My point, when I say that he destroyed luxury fashion, is not from a business perspective. I just think that marketing model of create loads of things that are aspirational, create all these aspirational goods that cost less than the actual products that your brands are known for making, like in Louis Vuitton's example, like leather goods, like luggage, trunks, stuff like that, and then sell perfumes and then sell belts and then create this whole aspirational vibe. I don't like it because brands then get away with murder in terms of quality. The cotton t-shirt selling for £300 to me is like mind-blowing. Jackets that you open the jacket and the inner lining is horrid. The construction is terrible from a lot of these luxury brands. So that's what I mean by he destroyed luxury fashion. It's a mentality. But Bernard Arnault will be fine. He's, in terms of from a business perspective, he's definitely a trailblazer. But even I don't want to praise Bernard Arnault's business practices because the way he acquired some of these brands, and that's also something that in the book that Dana Thomas wrote, she goes deep into like how some of these brands were acquired. You also learn about that watching the documentary series Kingdom of Dreams. So definitely watch it if you can. They talk about the crazy ways that he acquired some of these brands. like when you learn about it, I don't even know if I can praise those business practices, but yeah, I don't think I gave Bernard Arnault a hard time. I think he'll be fine.
Phenomenal opportunity of marrying hugely aspirational consumers with aspirational brands by creating iconic products which they in turn keep buying. Luxury is an identity people will buy to be seen, to be revered, to show off, to say they've reached a certain status, to relate to a certain celebrity.
I know people do that. I just think it's sad, personally. Like people wearing, like the reason of buying something is to show off. I think that's sad. That is sad. I know people do that, and I know that's the reality, and I know most people will continue to do that. I just don't agree with that. It's not something I'll promote personally on my channel. It's not the way I think about clothes. It's not the way that I would implore anyone in my audience to think about clothes. And so I understand these things, but once again, that's why I said I'm not giving Bernard a hard time, because these are aspects of fashion that I just don't agree with to my core.
The identity of whatever that luxury item is. It's very much an emotional purchase, but it's for us as consumers to become more discerning, more demanding. There's the internet, which has opened up the world to everyone. There is a ton of information for you to research brands, to make sure that your money always works for you and you get the most from your money. It would be great to get your thoughts. Do let me know in the comments down below. But to all my viewers, thank you for watching, and I look forward to seeing you all again soon.
Okay, that was interesting. That was fun because I haven't done a reaction video in a while. I'm going to subscribe to her because she seems like she will make really interesting videos. So definitely go and check her channel out. So Anesu. She seems to agree with me on the more fundamental points in terms of quality and looking for quality and what is quality and focusing on that rather than just focusing on a name. And so I definitely know I'm going to enjoy some of her videos, like when I go through them, when I have the time. That being said, she had some good points, but I do think that she's missing the point of the video, and definitely not reading a book and saying that none of the information is relevant to me is a bit crazy. If I'm going to critique what someone has said and they're referencing a certain piece of information, if I haven't read the piece of information, I don't see how I could critique that effectively, personally. But that being said, I do think she made some amazing points. There are definitely a lot of points that she made that I 100% agree with. So definitely let me know your thoughts below. This has been a very long video. I tend to not like to make videos this long, but if you guys want to watch stuff like this, let me know and I'll be back with another video very soon.